Hey, it's Lee Loughnane with Chicago, and you are listening to The Other Side of the Bell.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to everything trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We'll help you take your trumpet playing to the next level. I'm John Snell, and I'll be your host for this episode. Joining me today is trumpeter Liesl Whitaker. We'll get to Liesl's interview here in a moment after a word from our sponsor and some trumpet news. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. Well, I'd like to welcome all of our new listeners after Eric Baker's episode a few weeks ago. If you missed Eric's episode, go back and check it out. It was one of our more popular episodes. Eric, of course, is from the Trumpets Mic'd Up on Instagram and TikTok. Folks that even outside of the trumpet world know him for his orchestral hijinks, so to speak, but also bringing a lot of people into the fold. It was very refreshing talking to Eric last episode. So welcome to new listeners. Happy to have you on board, and you only have 130 something episodes to go back and listen to. Also, I've been traveling all over the place. In fact, tomorrow I'm flying to the William Adam Trumpet Festival, which if you're listening to this when it posts, it's not too late to sign up. June 19th to the 22nd in Clarksville, Tennessee. Charlie Davis, Larry Hall, Bob Slack, Carl Sievers, all the folks that were on our panel a few episodes back will be giving presentations. I'm going to be honored to give a presentation about mouthpieces, although it will probably have very little to do about mouthpieces, just a little hint. I get asked to speak because I work for a mouthpiece company, and then I talk about completely different things. So if you're in and around Clarksville, check that out. And a huge thank you to Dr. Rob Waugh for inviting me to speak and be there to do valve alignments and things like that. But I was going to mention, we've really been on a whirlwind. I had a wonderful time at IWBC. Huge congratulations to the folks that organized that. Susan Slaughter and Maurice Speziali, who were recently on the podcast, were there. If you haven't been following us on social media, go check it out. Susan Slaughter did a booth takeover. If you'll remember from her interview, I was complaining about not being able to hear any of the great recitals and master classes that happen at these events that we exhibit at. And Susan was there on the first day, ready to be trained on how to sell mouthpieces. And then she looked at it and said, John, check out the schedule events. Tell me which recital you want to go to, and I will be here. And she did. I got to hear the Cobalt Brass Trio, my good friends with Cobalt Brass, put on a fabulous performance. And I don't know, maybe it's a little disconcerting how many people were heading to the booth once I left because they wanted to work with Susan. So no, not at all. No ego involved at all. It was wonderful having Susan there. And these are the kinds of things that wouldn't happen if it wasn't for this podcast, having a legend like Susan Slaughter holding down the fort, so to speak, at the Bob Reeves Brass booth. But we have photos of that. I also met up with Kate Moore, who was being honored at the event from the BBC in London, and looking forward to visiting her on my trip coming up. She came by the booth, got some mouthpieces and valve alignments, and Maurice Speziali came by with her signed Duke Ellington photo that we talked about in her episode. And it's at the framing place as we speak. So you'll see it behind me, one of these episodes hanging proudly on the wall. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to Marie Speziali's interview. A fabulous story that she told about getting to play with Duke Ellington. So huge thank you to everyone. Dr. Keach, Dr. Chris Keach came by the booth, both at IWBC and ITG. Bria Schoenberg popped by, try some Ulven mutes. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful time in Connecticut. The following week, we were at ITG in Salt Lake City and had just as whirlwind of a time what a circus ITG is. But we sold some Shire's horns, found some new homes, and we sold out. And valve alignment, we were booked up solid. I don't know how many years in a row at ITG we've booked up in valve alignments, and unfortunately had to turn some folks away. Good problem to have, but we hate saying no to folks. But and of course, many guard bags and mouthpieces and things found happy homes. And many of you came up to talk about the podcast. A lot of you liked the Lee Loughnane episode. Todd Gray came by and talked about how much fun it was listening to a legend like Lee Loughnane talk about Chicago, the band, and all of his trumpet playing things that a lot of folks don't get to hear. So anyway, just want to let you know, I'm sure there's a lot more people that I need to give shout outs to. It's a long list of you that came by. And I just want to let you know that it means a lot to me. That's all the news I have. Again, William Adam Trumpet Festival happening this week in Tennessee, and then I'm going on vacation. So we'll still have some episodes to post over the summer, and then we'll regroup later in the summer for our fall travels. Now, without further ado, here's my interview with Liesl Whitaker. Liesl Whitaker is a top commercial and jazz trumpeter based in New York City, currently playing lead trumpet in the Broadway production of Death Becomes Her. Her Broadway credits also include Some Like It Hot, Mr. Saturday Night with Billy Crystal, Suffs, and Tappin Thru Life with Maurice Hines. A 21-year veteran of the U.S. Army, Liesl made history as the first woman to serve as lead trumpet in both the Army Blues and the Jazz Ambassadors. She's a charter member of the Diva Jazz Orchestra, spent nearly 2 decades with the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, and has recorded and performed with the WDR Big Band, Victor Goines, and others. Her work spans the stage, studio, and service, and she continues to be one of the most respected lead trumpet players in the field. And now, here's my interview with Liesl Whitaker. Well, I'm so honored to have with me today, on the other side of the bell, Liesl Whitaker. Liesl, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, honored to have you on here, and excited to talk about the trumpet. And let's start right from the beginning. How did you find the trumpet, or did the trumpet find you?
I didn't find the trumpet on my own. It kind of presented itself to me. I started out on French horn. I, like most people, started in elementary school with the school band program. I was living in Carroll County, Maryland at the time with my parents, obviously. My father was in the Army and stationed not far from Washington, and so that's where we were. Brought home the typical flyer in 4th grade. Joined the band. I looked through it and I had it all ready to go and took it to my dad in the evening out on the porch, and he says, "What do you want to play?" And I said, "I want to play drums." And he said, "Okay." And he took his pen out and French horn will be just fine. And he signed me up for the French horn.
He signed you up.
Yeah. No drums for me.
I love it. And I mean, did your parents play music at all, or?
My father was a piano player by, just a hack at home. My grandmother was a very, very fine pianist, classical. She knew left-handed chords. My father learned how to read fake music, fake sheets before he learned how to read, anything else. So he was kind of a hack player. I like to call him. He just played for pure enjoyment. He'd play with his elbow. He'd do whatever it took to make his kids laugh. And he just had a great time. He played kind of stride. I'm not sure if he ever hit the actual roots, but he had a good time. Searching for the roots and the thirds, so it was fun to watch.
What fun. So you grew up around music, not necessarily around professional musicians, but you were surrounded by it, and it sounds like they encouraged it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was just always in the house, always the music was somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So you started off in 4th grade on French horn, and how did that go?
as you can imagine, in rural Maryland, the French horn wasn't that popular, so I was always the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, and the music at that time, wasn't particularly interesting as a beginning French horn player. I think I did a lot of oompas, a lot of marches, upbeats and da-da-da-that's. And I kind of got bored with it. Not that it wasn't difficult. It was extremely difficult, but I just wanted to play the melody sometime,
Mm-hmm.
And I was enrolled in Catholic school, and there was one trumpet player, just like there was one French horn player. And God bless his heart. He was the nicest, kindest kid, but he couldn't play. He couldn't get a sound out of the horn. Just had no gift for it at all. So I thought, that's weird. I think I could play that better than him. So my brother had a trumpet in his closet, which I stole. I didn't borrow it. I didn't, ask. I literally stole it from him. Just took it because he wasn't playing it, and took it out to we were living on a ranch in Kansas at the time. I took it out to the barn, and that's where I lived with the trumpet. Switched the hand to the right hand fingering, learned a couple different fingers, and just taught myself how to play from there. Went back to school, challenged the kid, and won the trumpet spot, and I never looked back.
That was it. Wow. So talk about determination. Just, I'm going to take this trumpet, and you learned on your own just by ear, figuring it out? Yeah.
Well, a lot of things were similar. It's a brass instrument. A lot of things were the same. So wasn't much of a stretch.
So at which point did you ever get private instruction, or were you self-taught going through school?
No, I was self-taught all the way up until college. In high school, there was a gentleman named Chris Christopher who used to cruise around. He worked for the music store, and he'd drive around all the county schools and pick up the rental instruments and take them back for repair and do whatever he needed. He kind of serviced that area, and he was a trumpet player. So the music store was across the street from the high school. So when I first moved to North Carolina, I was a junior in high school. My parents kind of uprooted me and my sister and took us out there, and I got stuck in the bands. This is no longer Catholic school. This is public school now, and I got stuck in this huge band program. And because it was the beginning of marching band season, they don't have time to listen to you play. They just stuck you on the end of the line, and good luck to you. So I got stuck at the very last chair of the trumpet section out of about, 20 of us. So I was sitting last chair, third trumpet. And I was like, this sucks. And I kept going every day to my band directors, and the guy named Mark Payne in Burlington, North Carolina. I said, you got to let me get out of this hole. He's like, when things calm down after marching band, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. And he finally, after a long time, he let me he let me play, and he heard me play, and he's like, wow. And so I just started from the bottom, and one by one moved my way up, as high school kids have to do, and challenging your way to the top. And that was how I did it.
Wow. So, and what was your practicing? I mean, were you obsessed with playing? It sounds like you really enjoyed it. Was this thing you came home and?
Well, I mean, I didn't really grow up in my family was, we were on a ranch, and so everything was outside. Nothing really took place inside. And, I was one of 6 kids. And I was number 5, first girl. And so there was, there was a lot going on, and I don't know, my parents weren't really super engaged. Let's just say that. So, for me, it was just about grabbing the horn, whatever it was, and running out to the barn and being out there by myself with the sheep, with whatever was out there, and just playing at all hours, just me and my time alone. It was kind of my thing. I just remember being very young and connecting to music, as many musicians have stories like that. It's just really something that really clicked. You heard it in your ears at a very young age, and it's kind of, So I've always had that kind of in my head. It's always something that's appealed to me. Wasn't much of a stretch.
And that was, it was your way to connect with yourself, and like you said, have you time.
Yeah, and my father had all of us learn how to play piano from a young age. We all took that. It was one thing we did. We took private piano lessons all the way up until I think I was in 7th grade from the Catholic school nuns, which is a whole nother. We'll go into that. It's a
whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother. Yeah. So, but anyway, so I did have that. Going for me, and started piano like at 4 or 5. I do remember that, and I remember sitting with my grandmother and her, her hands on my hands and playing along. So it was around.
Plunking your way through stuff.
What
kind of? Were you listening to any other trumpet players? Were you anything?
No.
Really? So just
it's really pretty amazing that I even became kind of a trumpet player, because I didn't listen to my parents. They had 8-track tapes. I'm of that generation. I remember Elvis Presley. I remember John Denver. and I think I remember Neil Diamond. And those were my go-tos. And then when growing up, my brothers and I, we used to pretend, and my sister used to pretend we were the Beatles, and we'd jump on the beds and act like we were the Beatles, the four of us, different things like that, but it was never jazz. I remember going and seeing the National Symphony when I was in 5th grade and just had my mind blown, just seeing strings. I couldn't believe the amount of sound that could be pulled out of the string instrument, and just the horns, the way they just soared, and it just was so touching to me. And then that I was hooked from that point on.
That was hearing the National Symphony.
Yeah.
Interesting. So then, high school comes around and you're getting ready to go to college. Was it, were you going on as a music major? Was that a difficult choice? What?
Well, I went to 3 different high schools. First of all, I went to private Catholic school until my junior year, and then that school closed down. As you can imagine, private schools have tough times staying funded. My graduating class would have been, had we stayed open, I think 9 people. Wow. It was very, very small, and small little town, in Manhattan, Kansas, which is not so small anymore. But anyway, that was most of my high school. And then my parents moved to North Carolina, and right before that, they stuck us in public school for about 3 weeks in Kansas, and then yanked us out and took me and my sister to North Carolina from Kansas, left my brothers, and put us in a public school there. So it was the 3rd high school I'd gone to as a junior, and when I transferred in. And then, like I said, it wasn't like I had these grand plans to be a musician. I didn't have any plans to be a musician. It's just what I did. I was going to, quite frankly, be a veterinarian, probably just like my father. I was going to go to to school for biology or something like that, and study something that I could actually make money doing. Mm-hmm. That was, every parent's dream for their child, just be able to make a living. That's what my father wanted me to do, and that's what I was going to do. So when college came around as a senior and I didn't think I was good enough to audition for the major music schools. I didn't audition for North Texas or Juilliard. I just really didn't think I was good enough. I had no formal training. I had nothing to compare myself to. So I auditioned at some local schools in North Carolina, and I got offered a full scholarship to Appalachian State, and that's where I decided to go for a minute.
Up in Boone.
Up in Boone.
Beautiful part of the country.
Unfortunately, beautiful. Fortunately, beautiful. It's really hard to stay in class when it's so beautiful outside.
Yeah.
That was one of my problems. So.
Yeah. So that was your first. Did you go on as a music major, or?
I did. I went on a full scholarship music major. I went for in the fall of 1987. And it was during that time that, unfortunately, my parents had a huge, falling out and split up. And my mother had to be hospitalized. And it was a tough time for my family. And so, my brothers were off doing their own thing at that time. By that point, this is in North Carolina. And it was just me and my little sister at home. So I left school after a semester to come back and take care of my mom in North Carolina, just be with her until she got her health together. And unfortunately, I never really developed a really good, head for college after that. My head kind of got a little screwed up with, just dealing with life for a minute. I was going to
say, I can't imagine all of that happening at 18, 19 years old, and moving on to college and big changes, and then have those kind of family issues.
Yeah, it's kind of like your rug gets pulled out from under you. You do what you can, just land on your feet, and then if like every good plan we make in our life, you adjust, and that's what I did. And who knows? Hindsight's a great teacher, but we don't get the luxury of having it when we're in the moment. So
yeah, exactly. And did you keep playing through all of that, all the family turmoil?
Yeah. Well, I did, and then I actually I took a semester off, and then I went back to school at University of North Carolina at Greensboro for a semester, and that's actually where I started playing lead trumpet. Strangely, I was not a lead player, but I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to play jazz. I'm going to be a music major, and I'm going to play jazz in the band. So we went to the audition, and the day before, I had been in this music store in Greensboro, just screwing around with some friends of mine, just looking at stuff. No intent to do anything. And I found this guy. They had a huge, cardboard box of mouthpieces, just random mouthpiece, everything you can imagine. And I'm like, wow, what is this? So I started kind of flipping through them, and I found this one. I said, that looks kind of cool. I've never seen anything like that. And I said, how much is this? And they said, give me $3 for it. I gave them $3, and they brought home a jet tone. of all things, knowing nothing. Remember, I'm self-taught. I haven't listened to jazz. I haven't listened to anything. So I just brought in, I put in my horn, and I started playing up a chromatic scale. I went all the way up to like a high A flat, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know just these notes were there. And so I was like, just kind of played around with it. I was like, that's cool. And so the next day we went in for jazz band auditions, and they had me play, and I played some, I don't know, whatever the crap was they had you play, and then they said, okay, so can you play a chromatic scale as high as you can play? I said, okay. So I turned around like I was being all secret, and I put in the secret mouthpiece, and I played the chromatic scale up to a high G and back down, and they said, all right, you're our lead player, and that was it.
Just like that.
Just like that. I never played that mouthpiece again, just that one time. And my mouthpiece at the time was a bored out 1.5 C that, I played lead on. I played everything on because that's what I played. That was my mouthpiece. Nobody ever told me it was supposed to be hard, but the moment they did, I never could play it again. So weird.
That is, what a story. The $3 Magic Jet Tone.
Magic Jet Tone that got me a high G, and then just kind of pretty much launched the rest of my life. Who knew?
Changed the course of your career.
Complete trajectory change.
Wow. Wow. Do you still have that piece, by the way?
Probably. It's probably in a box somewhere.
Sitting in a drawer somewhere?
Yeah, I never throw anything out. It's hard. I'm kind of a pack rat, so
gotta frame that. The $3 Jet Tone.
I should.
So you make it lead in the jazz band. I mean, is this the first time now you're having kind of structured lessons through the school?
Yeah. I mean, I had taken some lessons at Appalachian State, and quite honestly, again, the first semester I was there, I did really, really well. Mm-hmm. After that, family turmoil kind of went down, and I just never really regained my focus. I actually became kind of maybe combative as a student. Just ask my professors, the ones that are still with us. I was not a great student. I was very difficult to teach because, quite honestly, I'd never had a teacher. I knew it all. I knew how to. I taught myself. Nobody didn't tell me had told me anything at that point. Mm-hmm. So I was a very difficult student, mm-hmm. and going through the stuff that I was going through at home, it was not a good recipe for me. So, I left school actually.
So, and this was at North Carolina as well.
Yeah, it was in North Carolina, and actually after that, I did try and go back to Appalachian first semester, but didn't do well, and started looking at other schools, and I ended up at University of Cincinnati. Someone had told me about, Bill Adam had told me about Bill Adam. Said, you got to go check this out. Actually, it was Joe Phelps at Appalachian State was an Adam student. And he had turned me on to the routine. He had started me doing the routine. He had brought Mr. Adam out a few times while I was there to work with his students. And while I didn't know anything of what he was talking about, all I knew was that he had one of the most gorgeous sounds I'd ever heard in my life. And I really, really wanted to strive to get that. I didn't know, again, terrible student. I didn't necessarily do the things he was telling me to do for the reasons he told me, but I did what he told me to do, and certainly within, I don't know, weeks, months, my sound started opening up, playing that 1.5 mouthpiece helped a lot, and I just really started falling in love with seeking out that sound. The sound was the goal more than anything. And that's where that started, was from Joe Phelps at Appalachian State. And then moving over to Cincinnati when I studied with Pat Harbison. Mm-hmm. He had been at Cincinnati before he went to IU. And that's where we met and worked with him and did a lot more routines, started talking a lot more jazz, learning more about history, jazz history and the music, and started just really listening as much as I could to everything I could, especially even commercial. A lot of commercial trumpet players. Because at this point, I was starting to think about, what's going to happen after I get out of here. The big bands were dead by then. This is the late 80s going into the 90s, and nobody was making, back when we were younger, there was, basically still, they're still touring, but there was, Buddy Rich was on, Woody Herman was touring, all those bands were touring, and you could do something with that. But, they were gone by then. So I started getting really interested in the commercial, and actually just everything I could learn, because honestly, that's really how you make money playing the trumpet, isn't it? It just being versatile and being able to wear different hats.
So with Pat Harbison, he's getting you through the Adam routine, he's getting you going on jazz, and now you're just listening. What kind of commercial stuff were you listening to? Who are your favorites?
Oh gosh, a lot of Jerry Hay, the horn bands of the 70s and 80s, just Tower Power, all those typical bands. It's just Jerry Hayes and Adam student, of course. That sound, that big fat sound that we all strive for, Jerry Hay, Gary Grant, those guys were the cream of the crop, still are, as far as I'm concerned. There's nobody better.
Yeah. So you're listening to that stuff. Did you start freelancing? Did you start playing?
Oh, yeah. Well, whenever I could. You're a college kid, you don't get a whole lot of work. But in Cincinnati, I didn't really work in Boone, but I did work in Cincinnati a lot. I started working. I used to go down and hang out at the Blue Wisp a lot, the Blue Wisp Jazz Club. And wouldn't hear the big band with John Von Ohlen. The Baron was the drummer. And he was a lesson every night, just listening to him play, watching him play. And I learned so much from him. Sorry about the dog. About playing lead trumpet just from John Von Ohlen, one of the greatest drummers ever, as far as I'm concerned. And that was at the Blue Wisp Big Band. I used to go hang out there all the time. I was probably a nuisance to them at that point. And if I hung out long enough, they'd have a few beers and be like, "Hey, why don't you go play the second set?" I'm like, "Yeah, winning." So
and
get them a little drunk and they'll let you play it. But I learned a lot in that band. Just cutting my teeth and really about playing lead and the role that I had as, with connection and working with the drummer and the confidence that it takes to actually lead and to say, this is how it goes. And, honestly, everything that comes with that, which is laying it out there and just getting your butt kicked almost nightly. It's hard, but that's where that started.
Paying your dues.
Absolutely.
Right.
Paying my dues.
So, can we, I'd like to delve into that a little bit more. As your role as a lead trumpet player, what mentally, what space do you have to be in?
Well, I'm still learning. It's been a lot of years and, it's taken me a long time to get to a space where I can just walk on stage and say to myself, you deserve to be here. That's a difficult thing. And not just as a professional, but as a female and as a female brass player and as a female trumpet player and as a female lead trumpet player. There's a lot of things going on there to unpack. And, it's the mental gymnastics that, sometimes go on can be really tough. And for me, that has always been the hardest battle, just getting out there and just being able to stand up this tall and say, okay, this is how it goes, and know that what I'm doing is right, because there's a lot of people that want to tell me that it's not. And so just based on things that have nothing to do with music. So that takes a lot of a grit, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. I
I
can't imagine. We've had, last few episodes, we've had stories from Susan Slaughter and Maurice Speziali and the things they went through in the orchestral side of things, that I'm sure are, similar to the experiences you've had where, that's, trumpet's not a girl's instrument, or Susan had a story of, the music director during an audition saying, no woman's going to play principal trumpet in my orchestra, things like that. And on the face of it, it's obviously terrible, but then just the inner turmoil, playing trumpet's hard enough. And to be an individual that's knows you can't even have a chance just because of your gender or whatever,
I mentor a lot of young girls, and the thing that is so frustrating for me and for them is that we spend so much time getting to square one because we have to unpack all of the crap that's going on between their ears. That is really completely unfair. Young boys don't have to deal with that. They just literally start out at square one. The girls, they're dealing with all these head gains, and they're dealing with all these conversations that are going on between their ears from one moment to the next. And all of it is due to what they've been told at home, what they've been told at school, what they've been told by their friends, what they're watching on TV, what they're shown in magazines, everything. It's bombarded with everywhere they go. Even their parents, not even meaning to. I'm sorry about the dog.
No, it's okay. Pets are welcome on the podcast.
They're just a little noisy. So anyway, we have to deal with that constantly. And, when I was a kid going through that, I didn't have anybody to unpack that with. So for me, it's really important to get at that early and try to eliminate it as fast as I can, when I'm dealing with a young girl. And it happens with boys too. It's just different things. But
yeah. Well, when the odds are stacked against you, like you said, from day one, because of all of those factors, trumpet is a head game, no matter who you are. But to add those extra layers of prejudice and sexism and all of those things on top of it,
Yeah. And then there's also other things that happen to women that men don't even think about. One time I was on a stage standing and playing a whole night with my peers, my male peers. And there was a guy, I'm going to share this. There was a guy in the front row that sat there the entire time playing with himself. Right in front of me.
What?
I mean, and nobody did anything. I mean, these are the things that, like, I mean, I'm standing, I got to watch that. And I'm trying, who does that? Who does that? I mean, who does that? I mean, and the only reason,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't even know where to go with that. You know, these are things that, you know, and I'm not like trying to bash, and it's something that women just didn't have to deal with, and it's unfair.
Well, and that,
It's
yeah,
flat out unfair.
and I appreciate you sharing, because we don't, you know, those stories, you know, people don't understand until they've experienced it, and I've never had anything like that happen in my life.
And,
All
and
my
probably
Blakers.
nor will you, and I hope you don't.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, but to kind of help understand the struggles that folks like yourself, and being the first woman in the military bands to hold a major position, things like that, to be the first without any kind of inspiration or someone to look up to. You know, fortunately now there are folks like yourself and Susan Slaughter and Marie that have come before us. But even then, it's still an issue.
Right.
We're still in the infancy of
We have so far to go.
Yeah.
We have so far to go.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing those stories, and hope you know you'll share more through the conversation. So speaking of, so what did you do after school? Were you freelancing? When did the military come around? Was that later?
Well, I didn't. Yeah, I actually didn't. Once again, I didn't finish school. I left because when I was in Cincinnati, one of my professors was Phil DeGreg, who's a piano player in Cincinnati. Great, fantastic piano player. He had gone down to Louisville to do a gig, and while he was on that gig, he ran into John LaBarbera. We all know John. And John said, you know, I've got a friend of mine up in New York that I used to work with in Buddy Rich's band named Stanley Kay. He was Buddy's manager for years and years and years. Stanley is having auditions next week for a band he wants to put together of all women. And he's just having an open cattle call. He's going to invest, if he says he's going to have like an open cattle call, if enough women show up with talent, he's going to invest his money, he's going to sell his baseball card collection and start a band. Great. Okay. What do I have to do? He said, just get to New York. So I called up my mother. I begged her for a plane ticket for me and a friend of mine, my friend Steve Schmidt in Cincinnati, one of my best friends, piano player, because she didn't want me to go alone. So she sent a caretaker with me. And we went to New York, and I went to this audition, and I played for 3 days. It was one of the most strange things I'd ever experienced as somebody coming from where I came from. And in 3 days, they chose me to be in the band as their lead player, and I was thrilled. And that was the beginning of Diva. Sherry Miracle, Mediva Orchestra, yeah.
So you were one of the founding members, so to speak, founding players. You've been with them ever since, and all thanks to John LaBarbera.
All thanks to Phil DeGreg.
Oh, Phil
John
DeGreg.
LaBarbera.
Yeah.
Through Stanley Kay. Yeah.
Wow. So what was that like in the early days?
It was great. I mean, this is before Me Too. This is post Sweethearts. It's not like it had ever been done before. It had, you know, Maiden Voyage had been in LA for 20 years at that point, I think. So I think there was nothing on the East Coast today. I mean, there was a couple, I think Kit McClure had some bands, but they were mostly doing cover stuff. They weren't doing anything original that I knew of. And they were very into dressing women a certain way, which really did not appeal to me at all. So I kind of avoided those situations, but Diva was good because they really wanted to take women in jazz, and present it in a way that was true, which is that women can play. So they had these national auditions, and most of the people did come from New York. It's true. I came from Cincinnati, you know, and a couple people came from other places. But when you put it all together, it was really good. The first time I couldn't believe it. I had never seen anything like that. And I get from myself that I was also a girl. You know, I've been in a band with all men my entire life. So when I actually sat out during the audition and watched them funnel women in and out of the sections, like I seen if they could find good, you know, blends, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought, that's the weirdest thing in the world to see a band full of women. How bizarre. It was bizarre to me, you know. And so it took some getting used to. But, Stanley had a lot of connections in the business. He had been Buddy's manager for years and years. And, he told there's a little side story, but he told a funny story. He was good friends with Buddy Rich and Mel Torme. And they used to argue about who was more famous, Mel or Buddy. So they decided one day they were going to go out and walk down the street in New York with Stanley. And whoever recognized whoever more was going to determine who, and Stanley was going to be the judge, who would be the most famous. So the three of them go out. They start walking down the street. Buddy, Stanley, and Mel. Stanley in the middle. And in 20 minutes, more people recognize Stanley. So it completely blew their whole theory. And but he knew everybody. That was the point. He knew everybody.
That was his job.
That was his job. He had this incredible baseball card collection that he stole for something like $30,000 or $50,000, and that's what he used to fund the band.
Yeah,
and we used that. And we recorded right away. We got out and did some festivals right away. He had it all kind of going. So,
so who was the original trumpet section? Do you remember?
I think it was me. Might have been Ingrid. I can't remember. Maybe Louise Berenger. Might have been Elaine Burt. I can't remember. I really don't remember at this point. It was quite a while. Maybe Kim Bonsanti was in there. It was kind of fluid for a minute.
Yeah, the band's getting organized and. Yeah.
I mean the core section from that early time was basically me, Tanya Darby, Jamie Dauber, and Barbara Lawanga. Sure, most of the big long run we had.
Yeah, and I mean, Barbara you still play with them from time to time when you can, or
from time to time. I can't always do it, know. So. And
I know Barbara's still on there, and
starting to bring some younger faces in now, which is good. They need to.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That was almost 30 years ago, maybe a little more, right?
Well, it was 1992.
Yeah,
so 33.
Cool.
That was that first audition. Was in the summer of '92.
So did you end up moving to New York after that, or did you just go for the audition?
I went for the audition, and then in '93 or '94, I ended up moving. I actually did. Again, school was great, but I wasn't a great student, so I went out and did cruise ships for a minute. Started cutting my teeth out there. Met my future husband. We got married, moved to New York, and that was 93 or 94. That was when I left Cincinnati.
Wow. So getting settled in New York, what was it like developing a freelance career? Did you have to basically start from scratch, or?
Well, yeah, of course. We all did that, and we know how. I'm sure you've heard the stories. And I was told the same thing. When you get to New York, pick up the union book. Call these guys. I had a short list that someone had given to me. Call these guys. So I think the first one on the list was Byron Stripling. So I called Byron. I said, I'm in New York. Yeah, you need a sub, blah, blah, blah. Byron was out with the Basie Band at the time. He said, I don't need a sub, but what you could do is you could come and help me out by house sitting for me because I have a little dog and I got to go out with Basie. Great. I need a place to stay. So he lived way up in the Bronx, and I went up and house sat for him. He came home for one night. I was asleep on the couch. And he walked past, and he threw a black shirt at me. He said, put this on, you're coming with me. I said, okay. So I put it on, and we got on the train and went down, and he took me into the pit of Jelly's Last Jam, which was my very first Broadway pit. And it was because I was dog sitting when I was on base. And I'll tell you what, that changed my life again. I had never heard a trumpet played like Byron Stripling. And if you've ever heard Byron play live, it's freaking phenomenal. That sound, he moved some air. And he was in a pit with 4 trumpet players. I can't remember who all of them were now, but they were famous. And so I'm sitting there in the pit, and I'm not knowing what I was going to expect. And all of a sudden the lights go down, the orchestra starts, and my mouth is just on the floor. And out of, it seemed like nowhere comes somebody up on a rise. And I look over, and it's Gregory Hines. I'm like, oh my God. And he looks down, not expecting to see a woman. He goes, oh, hi there. And he just was really shaking my hand. And then up he goes and starts the show. It was really fantastic. I'll never forget that.
How surreal.
And then years later, my first off-Broadway show would be with Maurice Hines. So it's all these crazy connections. I'm kind of, and Kenny, my husband now, he and I talk about this all the time, all these little synchronicities that kind of creep up through your life. They're just little, what I call God shots that show you, you're in the right place,
Yeah. So
funny little things.
Go from dog sitting to sitting in the pit.
With Gregory Hines. Shaking my hand, it was just crazy. And but again, it was at the time I didn't know what was going on. Byron was just being nice, and probably trying to inspire me because he knew I was fresh in town. And yeah, he did that for me. And I'll be grateful forever for that.
Yeah. Byron is my only exposure to him is the GRP All-Star Big Band. With Chuck Finley and Arturo and Randy Brecker. I probably burned that album out in high school.
That was the shirt he had me put on. GRP Big Band, All-Star Big Band shirt. The black shirt he threw across to me to put on to go in the pit. Yeah.
I love it. It's small world. But yeah, I've never met, I got to meet Byron at one of these points. So, I mean, how long would you say you started working regularly in New York? I mean, I know you get your first call on Broadway. It doesn't happen overnight. Was it?
No. In fact, the person that called me first for Broadway was Glenn Drews. He called me to come in and play with him at Guys and Dolls. And it did take a couple years, not really a couple years. It only took a few months. But once he got me in, I did my homework. I did a good job. And then I started working really regularly. It's actually kind of a thing on Broadway. If you do a really, really good job the very first time, word gets around. People find out. And then you get a reputation of somebody that's going to do your homework and take care of business. And that's all the sub has to do. And that's all the chair holder wants, is to know that when they can take off, that their chair is going to be completely covered and everything's fine. So, they knew that I was going to do that right away because I did it.
So what advice can you give for someone who wants to play Broadway? I mean, when you're getting down in the pit, like what skill set? Is it the reading? Is it the styles? What makes you successful in the Broadway scene?
Well, the Broadway scene for trumpet players is well, if you're a sub, your job, number one, is to sound like the chair holder, period. It's not your job to go in there as a sub and recreate the role. We don't want that. Your job is to support the actor. See, on Broadway, it's not really so much about the orchestra, although I would argue that the orchestra is a character and important to the musical, but the real people that are important are the people on the stage. So you don't want to come in and as a sub and sound different and do anything to throw the actors. That's number one. You have to sound like the regular. The number two thing is you got to do your homework. You don't just play through it a couple times. There's a whole protocol of how to do it. You come in, you get the music, you get the video of the conductor's cam. Now, back when I was learning shows in the 90s, we didn't have conductor's cam. That technology, we didn't have that yet. You went in with a cassette bit, you recorded it, and you sat and learned the show with a cassette. And I used to rewind it seconds at a time with my finger because I had to time it because we didn't have a video to see the cues. We had to do it all by counting and by memorization almost. And it was difficult. So we did go in and watch the show. That did happen, but we didn't have the reference points that we have today. So it's a lot easier to learn a show now, I would argue. But yeah, you do the homework, you spend the time with the book, you learn it with the video now until you can go front to back and you can start in the middle until you just learn it inside out before you go in. I have people that come in and said, yeah, I'm ready. I played through it, 3 times. I'm feeling good. And I'm like, dude, man, I'm playing through it like 300 times and stuff still surprises me. Come on, you gotta do a little more. So it really is about, doing your homework more than anything. As far as being a chair holder, the most important thing for me is having a good sound and having knowledge of the way the music is supposed to sound in such a way that the composer intended. Now, that said, I've played since I've retired from the Army, I've played 4 Broadway shows. All of them were completely different, required different kinds of playing. But I also needed to know, like the one I did before this one, the Suffs came from, it was set in 1913 on. The music was written by Michael Starobin, a great composer, but it was also written with that instrumentation in mind of what would have been around at that time. So it required, I actually tried to go and do some studying. I tried to study the music in some sense before I go in. So I went and listened to as much recorded music. We have fine recorded music from 1913. That's the problem. So I listened to the earliest stuff I could find and just kind of got it in my head about, where things were long, where that was, and it really was, it's a learning experience, honestly. People think Broadway shows are a drag because, you play the same thing every time. No, honestly, it's kind of the best thing in the world because I get to do research going into it. If I want to do my job right, I feel like it's important to know what you're supposed to sound like, what the composer's intent is. So for me, for Suffs to go back to 1913, 1919, trying here, that was important because that was what he was hearing. When I did Some Like It Hot, it came to a completely different kind of, we're talking about. And that was the hardest show I ever played as far as physical stuff. But it was a different thing. You know,
How so?
oh, it was so hard. It was so hard. That show, and I think it's on the road right now. And I think Matt Gallagher is playing the lead. You can ask him. It's a blow. There's nothing like it. I mean, it was fun. It was like swinging from the chandelier for 3 hours straight. But my God, you did it with 300 pounds on your back. You know, it was hard work.
Just the writing for the trumpets, or
Everything. Not just the trumpets. The whole orchestra was just. I mean, there's blood on the bass player's charts. And I mean, it was really, really a difficult show. And it was just what they wanted, you know? So going into that, I really tried to do some research on what that sound would be. And it's not just about playing the notes, you know? It's about nuance. It's about putting bends and scoops and personality in it to make it. That's the character I'm talking about, you know, in a Broadway show. I would argue that the orchestra is an offstage character because we support everything. And if we're dead, the actors kind of get no energy. So it's important to bring it every time, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, great advice. I want to switch now to how you decided or why you decided to go the military route. Was that like the audition come up, or was that a difficult decision for you?
It was a difficult decision, but it was kind of coming. Again, I was in New York. I had been subbing on Broadway for years and doing a great job. I never got one note as a Broadway sub. Never, not once. I was very proud of that, you know. But yet there were guys that were moving to town after me that were subbing, and then they would get called to be the chairholder for the next show coming. And this started happening show after show, year after year. It's like, what is going on? I've been here longer. I've never gotten a note. I do a good job. Why am I not getting called for a chair? And then, strangely, I was on the road I was driving down to my parents, I think, and I was in the car with my ex-husband at the time, or now, my now ex-husband. And we were just having a conversation, and the phone rang, and I'm like, I'm not going to answer that. I checked my machine. It was a message from somebody who was in the Army Blues, a guy named Graham Breedlove. Fine trumpet player from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Anyway, he called and left a message, said, hey, we have a lead opening coming up. Would you like to audition for the Army Blues? And my husband, who was at the time, was an ex-British Royal Marine. And he heard it, he said, Army? I said, yeah. He said, no, we're not going back in the military. I'm not going back in the military. I said, all right. So I erased the message.
Yeah.
A week later, he called again. And I didn't recognize the number, so I answered it. And I spent 2 hours on the phone with him while he, you know, I was like, at first, like, yeah, you know, I don't know. We're really not interested in this. I don't think we can do this. And he said, just hear me out. And we spent 2 hours on the phone. He started describing the gig to me. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like that's that bad. And the more he went, I'm like, well, yeah, this makes sense. I could actually go and get like hired and have a job and make the same amount of money that the men were making. He said, yeah, it's not based on anything but rank. So you make the rank, you make the pay. I'm like, wow, I can't get that where I'm at. So why don't I do it? Why not? So my husband said, I don't really like it. And I said, well, I can always say no if I win. Okay. So I did. I took the audition I won. And he said, it's a pretty good job. And I said, yeah, it's a pretty good job. He said, where do we sign? And so I took the job. And then I think 3 weeks later, I was on my way to boot camp.
Jeez. So just like that. So what was the audition like?
The audition was like 3 or 4 teams of theirs. I remember one chart on Little Sunflower that was just killing. I think it was a Mike Tamaro chart, but it's just really hard. That was on there. There was a Fat and Mel chart. I think it's 3-in-1, 4-in-1. Which one is it? 3-in-1? I don't remember which one it is. And a couple other things, just different 3 or 4 different varieties of style. And it was funny because they said, I should have known something was up. They said, come in and we want you to audition like you're rehearsing the band. I said, what do you mean? He said, we want you to be the lead player. They said, tell them what you want to do. Like you rehearse them. Tell them where the cutoffs are. Tell them what you want to do. I said, all right. So we went in and started playing. And I tell you what, as soon as I heard the band playing, it was like falling in a big comfy chair. The pocket. The drummer, Steve Fiddick, is one of the best timekeepers I've ever worked with. Really solid time. The band there was a pocket. And you could all I had to do was just come in and play. I didn't have to worry about the time. I didn't have to worry about pitch because it was all set for me. You know, I just had to come and play. Could not have been easier. And that was my first impression of what the Army Blues was. It was a great, great band. And I had never even heard of them.
Amazing.
So,
But your audition was with the entire band.
yes, with band, and they unanimously selected me. Eventually, there was one holdout, and rest his soul, he's passed away since. One of the tenor players said, I just don't know. I think she's going to be pregnant all the time. I think this is a bad idea.
What?
And I didn't find this story out till later when he came up to me and apologized for that comment. And he said, I said this at the audition, and I'm really sorry. He told me that. It was really, really a really magical moment that came around for him.
Oh, good on
But
him.
that was the one holdout.
Good on him for coming around, but still, it's just, I mean, I can't imagine. Yes.
Again, different things.
Yeah. So, you were mentioning, as you were in school and stuff, the opportunities for jazz players and when we were young with the big bands touring all the time, the military big bands are great because you are in a full-time big band. It does provide the opportunity to play and rehearse all the time, which is rare these days. Even like somebody like Diva, you guys don't get together all the time, right? If a tour comes up or something. So walk us through that. What was it like now once you joined the Army Blues?
Well, once I joined the Army Blues and got out of boot camp, I was literally rehearsing almost every day, and it was fantastic. Again, a killing band. Boot camp sucked, but we got through it, and I'd never known of anybody that died in boot camp, so I knew I could get through it too. So, it did suck. I'm not going to lie. But we all went through it. And on the other side is a great gig if just doing what you love to do. Now, we did have a backup. Our backup MOS was MPs. We didn't really have to deal with that. Now, in crisis situation, who knows? I've never been in the military. So, I was there for 9/11. That was a different thing.
Yeah.
But, and we did go in crisis mode. But there are, you're still in the Army. You're still in the Army. You still have a lot of things you have to take care of.
So what does that mean though? So that means you have a backup role in times of emergency?
Yeah, it's a backup MOS in case of emergency. I think all MOSs have them. Every person in the Army has, okay, if something happens and you can't do this, you can do this. Or if we don't need this, we need this, they'll do that, So in the emergency for the band musicians, our backup career was an MP. So if things all right, band needs to take a back seat, now you're an MP. So
that's military.
But we
police?
never did.
Is that interesting? Yeah. But did you ever have to do any of that? You said 9/11.
No, 9/11 came around, and we did get, because the Pentagon is in our backyard at Fort Myer. We did get tasked with the recovery. We didn't. There was some of our soldiers that were down actually physically in the building. The rest of them were off on the sides of the Pentagon, helping with credentials and little things that we could do without getting in the building.
Yeah.
And
jeez,
just to be helpful. I went to my command. I was 9 months pregnant when 9/11 happened, and my son was born a couple weeks afterwards. And I remember going to them and saying, "Give me some BDUs, some maternity BDUs. I'm not going to sit at home. You're going to let me help you." And they did. They got me some maternity BDUs, and I was part of the help. So
wow. Take us through, what's it like being in an Army band day to day?
Well, I was with two different units. The first unit was the Army Blues and the Army Band in Washington, and that was a very different job. My job was to play lead trumpet, in the Army Blues, but I also had to help with the ceremonial support. We all did. I did a lot of funerals. We all did a lot of funerals in Arlington, whether it be simple honors, just us out with a bugler playing taps, or whether it be with a full honor funeral. We are involved with inaugurations. We're involved with funerals, state funerals. Supporting anything that goes down within the National Capital Region. A lot of functions at the White House. The Army Band has a fantastic men's chorus. I think it's a mixed chorus. It was a men's chorus when I was there, but now I think they've mixed it, which often performs all over various dignitaries' functions in Washington. And and any kind of thing that went down ceremonially, we were required to be a part of that if they needed us. We also, in the Army Band, there was not just the jazz, the Army Blues. There was a ceremonial band, which all they did was funerals and ceremonies, whatever that meant. There was a concert band, my counterpart in the concert band, and our counterpart, and then the chorus, and there was an orchestra. So there's a lot of opportunities. I want to say there's 238 or 239 musicians or people in the Army band it's a fantastic organization, and they support a lot of important events in Washington. And we didn't do any touring really with that. We would go out on small little TDY trips here and there, 4 or 5 days at a time, because the other functioning part of the Army music program is the field band, and that was across the river in Maryland up at Fort Meade, which is where I went for the last part of my career, the Jazz Ambassadors. I spent 9 years with them. And their function is, their purpose is basically to get into the grassroots and go out and be kind of a representative to the public and represent in that way, service the community in that way.
And you played lead with them as well.
Yes.
Well, what made you decide to switch?
Well, I had just had my second child, my daughter, and her father was in the Army Blues with me, and we were struggling with some serious schedule issues. So he had more time in. I'm like, I'll go audition for there, and I did. That's what it was. So I just moved on over there, changed schedules.
Yeah, and you've recorded with both groups quite a bit, right? That was a big part of it.
Yep.
Any particular recordings that stick out to you?
No. I mean, they were all challenging in their own different ways. You know? So one great thing about the Army Blues is that almost all of the members write. So they have like 10 or 12 people in the band writing for them in any given day, which is what a great opportunity if you're an arranger or a composer to have, this lab band at your disposal basically all the time to read your charts. So yeah, they do a lot of their own things, which is really great.
And a group that is, like a family, you guys rehearse all the time and play together all the time, just like the old road bands used to do.
Well, that was more true in the field band. In the Army band, it was a little harder to rehearse because we were constantly competing with ceremonies. It's not competing, but when I first got in the band in 2000, we were dealing with a lot of the last of the World War II veterans were passing away. Then, it kind of comes in swaths, and you deal with the Korean veterans were passing, and then the Vietnam veterans, and it comes in waves. And so you get to these busy periods in the cemetery where you have a lot of veterans that need to be interred, a lot of ceremonies, a lot of things going on. And couple that with, we started wars. We got involved in wars overseas, and now we have soldiers that are active duty that have to come home and be, have honors rendered. So it got to be a very, very busy time, and it was difficult at that time, in that particular unit, the blues would take a backseat because we have to take care of these veterans. And with the field band, however, that was the opposite. Our job was to play all the time. And so Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock or 9:30, whatever time it was determined we would start, we were there for 3 hours and we were playing every day. That band was tight. The field band was way tighter than the blues only because we had block leave. So that means we had to take our leave together. And we rehearsed every day. The blues did not have block leave. You could take leave whenever you want. So if I didn't want to do a concert, I could just take leave for it. It's great to have the freedom, but the musical integrity, I believe, suffers. So block leave was a much better way, even though I was opposed to it when I was with the blues. Once I saw the rewards, it was worth it.
See the payoff. Were you able to freelance at all, or were you so busy with military obligations you didn't have the opportunity?
No, it was the blues. I freelanced a lot. I freelanced a lot around Washington. All the military guys do. It can be a day gig often, and then at night you often have your time free. So you go out and do a club date, or you do whatever comes in. The field band's a little harder because we were gone. We would go for 8 weeks on the road or 6 weeks on the road, and you're just gone. It's really harder to count on somebody to do a steady gig in a band when you're leaving every 3 months, So, but I did work. I managed to play. I played with the Smithsonian for 20 years. During that time, I a few other groups around town. Like every musician, we waited for the phone to ring. Take the gig.
And raising a family at the same time. I mean, it's a lot to juggle.
It was a lot.
Speaking of which, hope you don't mind me asking. I mean, what did you have to do trumpet playing wise when you had your children, when you were pregnant, and afterwards with those kinds of health issues? I mean, how much were you able to play, and did you have to change anything when you're practicing?
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't have anybody to ask. I didn't have anybody say, hey, so-and-so woman, when you were 9 months pregnant, what did you do when you were pregnant? What did you do? I had nobody. And so like everything that I kind of figured it out. I had a theory that as long as I played every day, my body would change gradually. My playing, everything would adjust and I wouldn't even feel it. That was my theory. And it worked. I played every day. Whatever was going on in my abdomens with the stretching and pulling aside of the muscles, I don't know, but it worked. I played up until the day before my son was born. He was born on his due date, strangely. 12 hours before I was playing a blues rehearsal.
Jeez.
I called in from the car. My water broke in the morning and my husband was driving. I called into the sick call, said, hey, I'm not going to be in today. I'm going to have a baby. Little things like that. It's a little crazy, but it was awesome too. I mean, I wish guys could check it out. I mean, I had a wonderful experience with my son. I played beautiful music with him, inside, and he was nowhere conscious of it, but it's a beautiful thing that I feel like I got to share with him. I or standing up at attention, 20 feet from the cannons and firing at him, kicking me, because it was so loud. Or I remember like playing and all of a sudden, as soon as I stopped playing something high, I would let go of my stomach and he'd just give me a foot right in my rib. I used to have to, I'd have to lift up my hand and push his foot under my ribs and pull it down like this and then put it right there and then I could play. And that's how I had to play, with my hand kind of jammed in here to hold his foot out of my rib cage. So it was that. It was a lot of just, I have no idea what's going to happen, but we're going to roll with it. And that's what I did. So with him. Cool. With my daughter, it's a little different. I had already done it one time. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do, I was also older. My daughter, I was 40 in my 40s when I had my daughter. I'm like, I'm not going to, I stopped playing at 8 months, I think, with her, or 7.5.
Even then, that's still last trimester.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot. I mean, Diva, I had the greatest baby showers. My family gave me my first one. Diva gave me the second one. And then my friends in the blues gave me the third one, which was the funniest one. They decided on one of the last gigs that for some reason I wasn't doing, I think I had an appointment or something, that they were going to all go to the dollar store and buy me baby shower gifts. So my baby shower gifts came from the dollar store. It was things like motor oil, sunglasses, just dumb little things. But in the end, they gave me a really beautiful gift to, some kind of gift certificate to a Toys R Us or Babies R Us or something like that.
That's fun.
But yeah, just a great bunch of guys.
And what about, after giving birth, getting back into shape, was that difficult after your time off?
Well, my first child, my son, I went back in 4 days. I was the breadwinner. My husband at the time didn't work. So I just went back to work. I went 4 days. I was doing a show off Broadway, a show like freelancing. Mm-hmm. So I went back to work there.
4 days after having a kid.
Yeah. I didn't play lead though, I have to admit. I sucked it up and said, hey, I don't think I can do this. I might have a mess after this if I play lead, so let me just play second tonight.
I can't even imagine. Jeez. And the same with the second kid, right back to it?
No, my daughter, I was a little older, a little smarter. I was like, you know what? Nobody cared that you did this the first time. Why are you going to put yourself through this the second time? So I took a little more time and focused on myself and, less on my job. And things were different then. I mean, it wasn't, I didn't have to, I wasn't the only breadwinner at that point. So
yeah. Well, and coming back playing, that any difficulties coming back after taking the time off, or were you still practicing a little bit at home?
Still practicing a little bit, I mean, after my daughter was born, I had coming back from pregnancies wasn't hard for me. What was hard for me was coming back after a throat surgery, which I had to have, which was not long after that. I had an injury to my throat. I had a mixed laryngocele in my throat. And they went in and they did a surgery to repair it. And that was harder because I have another one on the other side, and I'm trying to, I had to kind of learn how to refocus my air in a way to not think of it as such a large column, which is very Mr. Atom thing, the big column of warm air. And I had to kind of refocus it. I didn't go away from it, but I just kind of inverted it in a minute, whatever I had. And Vince DiMartino was the one who kind of helped me figure that out. Just like we had a little conversation before my surgery where he's like, hey, do you have a plan? What are you going to do? How are you going to come back from this? I'm like everything in my life, I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Figure it out. Yeah.
And he said, well, just, remember, you don't have to, you can think of it, instead of thinking of it, your air like this, think of it more like this. Just invert it. And that's this little concept helped me a ton to come back.
Interesting concept. Yeah. So, I mean, would you consider yourself a practicer? I mean, you do the Adam routine or do some form of it?
I do some form of the Adam routine almost every day. If I don't do it, it's because I'm probably usually pressed for time and I really got to get to something I need to work out, like I got to learn this lick and all right, I'm just to play a little bit and get going, but I don't have time to do the routine. Adulting takes a lot of time and we run out of practice time, which is the thing that I try to teach when I go and work with college kids, it's like, sorry to go off on this little tangent here, but this is an issue is like with college kids that don't understand. I mean, I certainly didn't, your job when you're in college, your job, like your parents' job to go to work is to go to school. And, that's it. That's all you get to do. I wish I had had somebody tell me that, when I was in school. But again, hindsight, it's wasted on us, isn't it?
Yeah.
I certainly, I try to tell my students that, and, any students that I work with now, this is your insulated, beautiful gift time. This is your time to be selfish and literally just live with whatever it is you want to do with the horn, and eat, breathe, and do it, and it's okay. Because when you get out, as you know, everything starts happening to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And at you.
Exactly. So, like when you were playing with the military bands, how much were you practicing? Would you get up and get, routine in before your rehearsals at 9, or what did that look like?
No. Not usually. I would warm up with some long tones. No, when you're rehearsing for 3 hours a day, every day, and then sometimes I was going out and doing shows or going to do club dates. So a lot of times I didn't practice before rehearsal. I'd use that's my time just to kind of. I'm also a big believer in taking rest, and I think, saying that out loud, I think scares some teachers, but I believe in it. And after having gotten my chops just destroyed in various things over the years, the only thing that ever helps is not playing the trumpet. It's a piece of metal we pull to our face. Come on, it's not that hard to think about. We do need a break sometimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, burnout is a real thing. And yeah.
Burnout and chop burnout, injury, everything. You get tired, you get fatigued.
Yeah.
So basketball players don't play every day either,
No.
They take a break too.
Finding that finding that balance between rest and just being lazy.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard to, motivation is difficult in a practice room, right? If practice room is where you're supposed to suck, it's hard to get the motivation up to pick up and go suck at something, knowing that you're going to just really stink for the next so many minutes or whatever, hour, 2 hours. That's hard to do.
Yeah. So now that you're retired from the military, you're still playing a lot. You're still doing Broadway. Any other projects you're working on?
Like the one of the greatest things about the military, and one reason I decided to do it, was that it afforded me a pension. And what that does for me as a musician is allows me to not have to take every gig that comes in. So that was one of the goals going in 20-something years ago, was like, New York has been here for a long time. So if I leave it now, in 20-something years, I can come back. It's still going to be there. There's still going to be Broadway. There's still going to be club dates. These band directors, band leaders may or may not be around, but there's still going to be somebody hiring. So I said, it's going to be here, let's just go do this. Because if I can invest that 20-something years now, look at what it would do for me in the future. Not only give me a pension, but it gives me the ability to say no. I don't have to take every gig because I don't have to put diapers on my kids. I don't have to, those jobs I don't take. I get called for them, but I don't really take them. There's a lot of struggling trumpet players. And, Kenny and I talk about this a lot. We were that struggling trumpet player at one point. I don't want to take that money out of their hands. That's important to them. So right now I do my show and I pick and choose. If somebody calls and says, you want to play this? I'm like, okay. Or no, I don't. It's really easy, and I wouldn't be there if I hadn't left to go do the military.
Mm-hmm.
So now I say that all understanding that when I served, it was a different time. These are definitely different times.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea what the military is like right now. So I can't really say that I would tell somebody to take a gig or not. But for me, it was great.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds
under different circumstances.
Yeah, on the face of it, to get the military benefits and be able to play regularly, make music regularly, and get paid for it, there is a certain security. But like you said, who knows what's going on with the military? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the general trend over the last few decades is to trim the band side of things.
Well, it comes up every few years. There's always this big, stir. Oh, they're going to cut the bands. They're going to cut the bands.
Mm-hmm. And
everybody kind of freaks out. And then, I don't know, constituents write letters to congressmen and it calms down, There's a really good side to the band. It's not just about playing music. It's about, this person who lives in rural Iowa, their son is serving and they're in Afghanistan and they haven't seen him, or Iraq and they haven't seen him in 3 years, They get to go to a concert with somebody wearing a uniform and doing something really, really fantastic. And it just gives them pride about what their kid is doing, their own child, It's a connection. The uniform, people connect with the uniform. Mm-hmm. And that alone just brings down barriers and lets people feel better. And that's why the work is important.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's get a little geeky now, since it is a trumpet podcast. Can we talk about your equipment, the horns, mouthpieces? I mean, you're playing in the pit. I'm sure there's a ton of mutes.
Yeah. Well, my mutes are just, of course I use Kenny's plunger.
Of course. Yeah.
I think I'd be kicked out if I didn't, but, no, I just the normal, I use a Charlie Davis Harmon, Charlie Davis straight, and just stone line cup.
Wow.
And a standard solo tone, old solo tone of Kenny's that he actually was letting me use because it just sounds so good. It sounds better than anything I've ever, he's a mute nerd, so
yeah,
he's got everything. So, he lets me use a couple of those. But the horn, I have an old New York Bach that I've been playing and played pretty much my entire career on.
Really?
I did for a couple of years. I played with Shires while I was in the Army, and the only reason I switched was when I first came in the Army, they said, one of the perks of the job, we'll buy you a horn. You go pick it out. I'm great. When's that going to happen? They said, tomorrow. I'm like, really? They said, yeah, you got to go down to Chuck Levin's in D.C. and pick out a horn. So I went down to Chuck Levin's. They didn't have anything in stock. They had one large bore Colicchio. I'm like, I heard Colicchios are good. You got to remember, I'm like 20. I don't know. Well, no, I was probably in my 30s by then. But yeah, I was in my 30s by then. But I'm like just new to the Army, and I'm thinking, I got to spend this money. They're saying if you don't spend it, it's going to go away. So I said, all right, buy the Colicchio. So I bought this Colicchio, large bore. Sounded great. Problem was I could only play about 3 tunes on it, and I was done.
Large bore catch up to you.
Yeah, it'll catch up to you real fast. Feels great for a tune, and then you're done. So I happily just gave it back to the Army and just continued to play my New York Bach. Mm-hmm. And then at one point, when I was with the field band, same thing. Changed units. They said, you got this money to spend. Great. When do I have to spend it? Well, you got to spend it by Friday. Oh. So I went up to the Shires factory and tried some things, and he set me up with something, and that was it. So I played this Shires for a few years, and there was nothing wrong with the horn. Mm-hmm. I just really, really loved my Bach. And the reason that I played it was because I had a flight case built, an anvil case built by the Army, had my horn in it, and it was in the truck, the equipment truck, and the truck took a swerve or whatever, everything crashed, and the equipment toppled, and my horn case came off completely crushed. Miraculously, my horn was fine. But at that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm not putting my horn on the equipment truck, so I started playing that Shires. And I played that for a couple of years and just missed my sound. So one day again, just put it away. And that was the end of that. Gave it back to the Army.
I'd love to hear more about the New York Bach. Do you know what year it's from and how did you get it?
So I don't know if you remember back like 3 hours ago when we started this conversation, I was talking about Chris Christopher, this guy who used to drive around the trucks in high school and pick up the rental. I don't think I ever finished that story. He used to pick up the rental gear and take it back to the music store to get it repaired. Well, he and I used to get together and play through Arben's duets. I'd never seen the Arben's book until I met him. And he actually had this horn. He worked at that music store. Somebody came in one day while he was working, had this old horn, came in and said, I got this old horn in the attic. Somebody give me some money for it. He said, I'll give you $200 for it. He says, done. So he paid maybe $300. He gave him a couple $100, whatever it was. And he had this New York box. And he started playing. He realized what a beautiful sound it had. So when I left school and got a full ride to Appalachian, he said, you're going to use this more than me. I had just bought a New York box for myself as my own graduation present to myself. He said, just give me the New York box you just bought. So we just did a swap. I took the New York box. He took the old box, or the new box.
Yeah.
And he ended up going off and becoming a Lutheran minister.
Huh.
And he's somewhere in the South now with his wife and whatever. But never really played. He only plays for fun now. And I took this New York box and I played my whole career on it, with the exception of those couple of years.
Amazing. Oh, what a cool story. Well, I bet Kim comes full circle.
Yeah.
And I mean, we first met because I used to swing by the Reeves booth at ITGs and things. How did you get you played Proviance for a number of years, right?
I still play Proviance. I play the same mouthpiece, same everything. I got off of the Proviance for a minute during Some Like It Hot because I got injured. I remember I told you that show was like swinging from the chandeliers. So in the rehearsals, just pounding, and early on in the rehearsal period, they had tons of stuff written ATA, and it honestly, I questioned it, but I'm not the writer, and it's not my job to question it. So somebody asked it, do you really want this ATA? And he said, well, they said they want screaming trumpet all through the whole show. I'm like, okay, can we make it optional? And they, some of the optional notes became optional, whatever, and I just stopped doing it, and because I started getting hurt, and by the time the damage was done, and I had this injury during the rehearsals, went into previews, and so basically I was constantly playing swollen. I was icing my chops at night. I was icing them in the morning. I was icing my chops between acts on the gig. Jeez. It was that much. It was just so bad, and I just needed more room. Everything was swollen. So I went to Greg Black and I said, hey, he was in town. I called up. I was playing for a minute. I also had GR make me some mouthpieces that I tried out for a second, played for a minute, but I never stuck with those. I always went back to the Proviance, just love that sound. So I tried one of these for GRs to get me through while it was getting more and more swollen. Gave me a little more room, but it wasn't doing it. Greg Black was in town. He said, come on down to Josh Anderson. We'll work on something. So he took measurements. He made me something. I took it, immediately started feeling better. We started kind of working together for a little while and giving me bigger things. And I got playing some huge pieces, but it was the only way I could get through that.
Wow. Just to make room for the chops.
Just room for this.
Shout out to Greg and all those folks over there too. We love them over there.
Absolutely. You know, and so, that's what got me through that show. And then when that show ended, I took a couple months off and just didn't play the trumpet because I just had to heal. I was just so beat up. And then I started back with Suffs in the spring, which definitely was not like Some Like It Hot, the complete opposite. We're back to 1913, 1919, kind of that range of music. I got back onto the Proviance now just recently in doing this new show, Death Becomes Her, just because I just love the sound. There's just nothing better than that sound.
Yeah.
And so I'm back on it.
Those pieces are amazing. That's why we still make them. Carol Proviance had an amazing year. Bob used to tell some stories about him. He was a virtuoso cornetist way back at the turn of the other century. And just had amazing years and designed some of the best, lead and commercial stuff before that was even really a thing. I mean, we're talking about the late 30s, 40s, and solid designs.
Oh, sorry, that was Woody. Woody. Sorry, I don't even pay attention. It's just like part of my day. I didn't even notice he walked by. When I was playing the 1.5C in college and it got to be too big, I didn't know where to go. And I had a professor said, hey, just try this. And he just had that mouthpiece sitting in his bag. And I never went back again. That's just what worked. I'm not one, I don't get tied up in equipment because that's just, my brain doesn't work on, I have to simplify everything. If I start throwing in parameters of this and that, it's too many variables for my mind to go. So I stay with what works and I don't mess with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Well, Liesl, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
What a wonderful conversation. Do you have how can folks find out where you're playing or anything? Do you have a website or do anything like that? Or just got to catch you?
My website, I play normally every night at Death Becomes Her. My website is actually my blog. I actually am a writer also. So I don't, I write some things on there related to the trumpet, but I'm not a geek.
Okay. Well, Lost you there for a second. Got
I
you
gotta
back.
tell him to stop calling me. That's Kenny.
Kenny,
Leave me-
you're
leave me
interrupting the
alone.
podcast. How's it going? Did you talk about the Pledgers?
Hey, we just
Yeah, and then if you still play with Diva, so we'll have links to the Diva Jazz Orchestra.
yeah, it's a Diva Jazz Orchestra, whatever. I think that's what their website is. My blog is my site. I play at Death Becomes Her, again, just freelance here and there. You might see me on something, hanging around New York, something on a Monday night, random.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have links to all those down in the description. And thank you for your service, and also thank you for being an inspiration, not just for young women trumpet players coming up, but for all of us.
Thanks for having me. I
breaking the
appreciate
glass
it.
ceiling. And you said you might have just been flying by the seat of your pants, but your perseverance and determination, got you from A to B, where it didn't work for anyone else to that point. So
Been lucky too. So
before I let you go, I have one last question for you that I ask all my guests. I don't know if Kenny tipped you off with this one, but if you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, what would that be?
well, the one piece of advice that I often give in master classes to students, and I still believe in, is luck favors the prepared. If you do the work, you are in a way much better situation to gain from that work. In other words, opportunities that presented themselves, as far as in my life, and I can only speak of my life, I've only been successful because I was prepared. Nothing happened because by accident. It wasn't, I just kind of played good enough to get that. No, I was ready. I was prepared for the blues audition. I was prepared. I wasn't so prepared for the JA's audition because I didn't know I was taking it until like the night before. But that one was a little different. And then, Ziva, just be prepared. The thing about, getting good at something clearly takes time and investment, but you don't gain confidence from not doing something. Everything is done from doing something. People don't want to do something. A lot of times it's because it creates a vulnerability for them. I don't want to do that because it makes me vulnerable. Well, practicing makes us vulnerable because we have to suck. It's the 1 hour we go into a room and we're, like we said before, this is the time we're doing the work. It was one of the things about college that used to frustrate me, was when I would go up on the 4-4 practice room and just hear people performing. I don't want to hear you perform. You're not playing for me. I'm supposed to be playing for you,
Mm-hmm.
So preparation is everything. In college, that's your job, to prepare. Everything that I've done in my job, in my life, as far as music, has come from playing a job, from sitting and listening to someone else, from experience, from getting my butt kicked, from putting my butt out on the line. You get the experience from doing it. You get your butt kicked from failing. So it's the opportunity to fail that creates preparation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so, that would be my advice. Luck favors the prepared. Be prepared.
Wonderful advice. And like you said, the folks that are running through a Broadway show 3 times versus 300, that can make all the difference. So,
well, yeah, it does. It does, absolutely. I'm just to say that is a big important point to make. Our what we do playing music is not just playing music; it's a business, and you have to have a good business head. So you got to take care of your business, and that's important.
Well, once again, a huge thank you to Liesl. It was an honor having her on, and her years of service in the Army, playing for both the Army Blues and the Jazz Ambassadors, and what she had to persevere to get to those positions is just absolutely amazing. An honor to have her on the program and for her to share her life story with you, her playing and her honesty, both about what had, happened to her, being a female trumpet player. We've heard Marie's stories and Susan Slaughter's stories on the orchestral side, and to hear Liesl's stories on the jazz and lead trumpet side of things. Like to think that we're hopefully making progress and we're in a better place than when these women were coming up, but still plenty of room for improvement as these stories unfold. So if you ever get the chance to hear Liesl in person, she is an amazing, amazing player. Hopefully you'll catch her on Broadway or playing lead in a big band. We'll have links in the description if you want to learn more about Liesl and what she's up to. And we have plenty of more guests coming up this summer. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that 5-star review, or if you're on YouTube, that thumbs up button. It helps the algorithm. We have to feed the algorithm in this business. And again, it's a very small token of appreciation for us, since we go through great ends to make this podcast happen. For example, I'm sitting in the front room without the air conditioning and it's 105 degrees out. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering why I'm sweating, that's why. But all for a worthy cause to help spread the good word of the trumpet players we have on the other side of the bell. I'm off to Nashville, got a flight to catch. See you at the William Adam Trumpet Festival and catch you on the next episode. Until next time, let's go out and make some music.